My friend Plotman inherited his optimistic visionary spirit from his father. His father had been able to see little iridescent and transparent winged things crawling up his legs. Up everybody's legs. Plotman's own gift lay less in the realm of second sight, more in the area of transcendental theory and practical application of the same. That is to say, he was an inventor with lots of ideas that didn't always work out the way they were supposed to. For example, one of the ideas he developed when he was living on the second floor of the Dunlap commercial house between 10th and 11th on Omaha Street had to do with putting together a suit made entirely out of Vienna sausages. It wasn't that Plotman was overly, or even particularly, fond of Vienna sausages. But he had his eye on the hefty blonde who occupied the room just across the port. She was a gym teacher, or something. Over a period of months, Plotman had tried every trick he knew to get her to be as interested in peeping across into his room as he was in peeping across into hers. 1. Doing nude exercises with the shade up and a flashlight gripped in his teeth. 2. Standing on one leg, like a stork, for hours. 3. Anything else he could think of. All to no avail. Not only did his attractive neighbor refuse to glance his way, she seemed to be making a deliberate point of refusing to glance his way. Things were starting to look bleak until Plotman had his great inspiration for constructing a suit built entirely out of Vienna sausages. Once he exhibited himself at the window, attired in the splendor of his Vienna sausage suit, she would no longer be able to resist him. He immediately plunged in and set to work on it, exhilarated. The exact number of Vienna sausages needed for such an undertaking came to 2,976. Exactly. And so, inasmuch as Plotman was highly unskilled when it came to handling a needle and thread, and found the stubby, slippery little Franks devilishly tricky to get a grip on, it took him a long, hard time to stitch his suit together. about 2 years altogether. This soon brought to light a number of problems he had failed to anticipate. To begin with, there was the problem of how rapidly and thoroughly a soup built entirely out of unrefrigerated finger food can spoil. To say nothing of how oppressive this can grow to be over a period of 2 years, particularly in the confines of one small room. Long before Plotman reached the stage where he could try his suit on in front of the mirror and see how spiffy it looked, the 2,976 Vienna sausages had gone to pot and were frankly reeking. As a result, Plotman spent a lot of time in the bathroom feeling ill. 1 month, 2, 3, the smell intensified and spread far beyond the 4 walls of Plotman's room. Flies soon became a big problem. Some of them came from as far away as Everly's Meat Market on Shook Avenue, drawn in swarms as if by a powerful fly magnet. Thanks to their presence, Plotman's room took on the air of a belated 1984 be-in in Baltimore. Hardly a moment passed when Plotman could not cock his ear and catch, floating up from below stairs, the plaintive yowls of most of the neighborhood cat population, who had taken to worshiping his suit from afar. To them, the redolence of 2,976 fetid little sausages was more exciting than even the dumpsters out back in the alley or the grease traps at Church's Fried Chicken 2 blocks over on 10th and Vine, which was saying something. Plotman had never liked cats, and it made him nervous to think of them down there now, clinging to the back screen at all hours as they yearned after his weenies. He began, rather morbidly, to fantasize, picturing to himself what might happen if the whole hairy-tailed gang of them ever succeeded in breaking down the back door and came pouncing up the stairs, intent on flensing him of his suit. Plotman's eyes darted feverishly, and there was much dark brooding over the cat situation. Not that it ultimately made much difference one way or the other, but given the continual strain and fatigue he was under, Plotman couldn't help experiencing certain mental lapses. As the months wore on, there were moments when he found himself sliding right off the end of the map, as the early cartographers might have put it. One day he had been hard at work on the left sleeve of his suit for 9 straight hours. He looked up, and there was Mr. Greenberger, his old high school shop teacher, stepping out of the wall. apparently unaffected by the passage of years, or, for that matter, by the fact that he, Mr. Greenberger, had been deceased and buried for the past 17 of them.
Mr. Greenberger? Mr. Greenberger? Mr. Greenberger?
Oh, bird brain!
How did you get in my wall?
When I see my arms, I see as if a cat was wed to a fly. Sometimes it would have the cat head and a fly body. Sometimes it would have the fly head and the cat body. Well, so what?
At such moments as these, and there came to be more and more of them as time went along, Plotman would press his knuckles against his temples and decide he needed to take a few days off from his suit, kick back and chill out. Nothing simple about putting together a suit of 2,976 Vienna sausages. It could wear a man out. But it was toward the end of the first year, when the suit was only half done, October or thereabouts, that Plotman suffered what was perhaps his worst setback. The blonde across the courtyard moved out. Evidently, she was gone for good, and her room was soon taken over by a retired army man who drank bourbon and 7-Up all day and fell asleep with a lit cigarette at 4 every afternoon and set his bed on fire. He seemed a tormented individual, not at all an attractive or satisfactory replacement for the hefty blonde. And Plotman, at this juncture, entertained serious thoughts about giving up on his suit. The project had become too much a matter of pride for simple abandonment. What with already having invested so much time and effort in the thing, and the feeling of destiny being somehow involved, Plotman decided he owed it to himself and the world to see his suit through. So at the end of 2 years, or 23 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days if you want to be perfectly accurate about it, when the big day finally arrived and he could at last don his suit for the first time, Plotman felt like he'd climbed Everest or something. Dressed, standing there with the 2,976 Vienna sausages actually encasing his body in their slimy embrace, Plotman found the proximity virtually overwhelming in terms of aroma, and for several minutes he had to fight hard to keep from passing out. Up that close, the fumes made his eyes leak and run like a pair of badly cracked eggs. Once he managed to get his eyes focused and the flies shooed away and could see himself in the closet mirror, he felt immediately reassured. His suit was everything he had hoped it would be, and more. Massive, streaky pink in color, glistening squamously, it made him look as though he were festooned in all the foreskins a busy hospital might hope to harvest in a year's time. Or like a high priest of the white worm cult of Eastern Thrace. Or like something huge and blobby grown with steroids in a vat. Or... Plotman ran out of superlatives at this point. And as he stood there quietly savoring his triumph, Mrs. Dunlap, the mad, fretful old landlady, banged on his door with her cane and then rattled the knob. Fortunately, the door was locked. Plotman groaned. He had been afraid all along that this was going to happen, mostly because of how, over the last 2 years, ever since the stench had first started getting out of hand, Mrs. Dunlap had been coming around about once a day, regular as Queen Estrus, to bang on Plotman's door with her cane and pester him about what smelled dead in his room.
Well, I thought that since whatever you had in there smells dead, you were probably boiling your shorts again, Mr. Plotman. No, I'm not, Mrs. Dunlap.
To make matters worse, or anyhow more ridiculous, she had somehow got it into her head that Plotman was engaged in the exotic practice of boiling his shorts. Who could say why? It's just something that had sprung up between them, part of the nitwit sing-song routine that invariably took place whenever she appeared.
Well, I wouldn't like to admit it either, Mr. Plotman, if I was the one who was in there with the door locked, boiling my shorts. I've told you and told you, I never boil anything in my room. I don't even own a hot plate.
In short, a typical exchange. By now it had become a litany, practically. Plotman gritted his teeth, foreseeing 20 or 30 minutes of anguished lassitude while they shouted back and forth at each other through the door.
Well, I can't say I blame you for wanting to conceal your activities, Mr. Plotman. People who boil their shorts aren't very welcome in polite society.
As such, it dragged on only with minor variations for the next quarter of an hour. And when Mrs. Dunlap finally hobbled away, bound for the basement to check on the mousetraps, always her customary next stop after visiting Plotman's door, Plotman at last had a chance to look down and take stock of himself. By then, of course, enough time had elapsed for a heavy natural attrition to take its toll. His suit, he saw at a glance, was in a bad way. Was on its last legs, in fact. Tragically foundering. Because his eyes were still watering, it was hard for Plotman to tell whether the left sleeve had come apart before the right leg dropped off or vice versa. But the whole spongy pink mass continued to slough away at an alarming rate, unraveling on him even as he watched. In less than 2 minutes, it was as good as gone. Proof beyond question, were any needed, that Vienna sausages are far too glutinous and unstable ever to be much good for soup making. Plotman heaved a heavy sigh. Damn. It was depressing to realize how miserably his suit had fared. And Mrs. Dunlap's meddlesome, ill-timed intrusion. There had only been a few minutes in which to wear and admire his creation. So brief, so fleeting it was, hardly seemed fair. Told himself that perhaps something might yet be salvaged from the experiment, provided he could locate some crackers and have those along with part of his soup for a late afternoon snack without poisoning himself. That was the thing. You couldn't let an obsessive, unbalanced crackpot personality like Mrs. Dunlap drag you down and mire you into defeat. You had to go ahead and make the best of things, no matter what. Plotman sat down to have his snack of crackers and soup. At that moment, the faint aroma of burning mattresses wafted in through the window. He heard the faint sound of his neighbor holler, growing louder, ever louder.